Okay, I have 5:30, so we'll get started. And I'll jump right into it. So I sent everybody a copy of a draft ordinance to look at and to comment on. I already got a couple of comments on it, but I'll let you all speak to that. I thought this was much easier based on all the input I've gotten from both this committee and the people who attend our meetings. Let me go over this briefly to tell you what's different about it.
Okay.
Or what it is. It spells everything out, but in particular, it has, and I wrote two versions, and this is a version that has, we're not gonna call it farm scale, it's gonna be industrial scale, because there's no farming involved with it. It's industrial scale solar, and this has that Culver will not have industrial scale solar. It will have, but this does allow for large scale. I want to stress that, which means if somebody, if a farmer or a business owner, farmers are business owners, wants to have their own system on their property, it will allow for them to have enough room to generate enough electricity for themselves to use for their businesses.
So it's self-use systems.
Yes.
I mean, that wouldn't even clarify it even more.
So it's a maximum of 10 acres.
Right. You see where I'm going?
So I do. I doubt anybody'd share it, but I mean, it's a good
Oh, I
point.
know.
It's a good point. But the main thing here was it just says we're not gonna allow industrial scale solar in our zoning districts. Now we can get, I spoke with Jeanette Cerisi about this, who's working on our other, zoning ordinances also. And she believes it's defensible. If it came down to that, which I kind of doubt that for Culver, but you don't know. But the important part is it's defensible for us to say that we wouldn't allow any industrial solar, but we would have the large scale systems available for people who wanted to power their own things.
The only problem with self-use, and I like that, but a lot of that energy goes back into the grid that unused. So NIPSCO will credit you, and that somebody could play lawyer games with that, since it
Because
is,
so you do have.
it does
that
credit.
Large
Yeah.
scale.
Yeah, but
It's but the intention is right.
that's where I'm at.
In-house,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, and I got you. Right.
So that's a good point.
Thank you.
So I'm just open for comments.
You want to do it page by page?
Sure, whichever way y'all want to go.
I'm not gonna wordsmith, but one of the things I recognize starting off the bat, I like the beginning three sections, the ABC, because they were concise. They get to the point. I'm wondering if you want to establish your authority before the intention of the document. This is who we are and this is why we can do it. So I would suggest switching B with A. Start with your authority and then move to the intent and then the public purpose. And I love the way that you phrase the intent. This is what we're trying to do and this is the purpose for it.
Okay, I'd like to, I'll look at some of the other ordinances, see if there's any
Sure.
if that's consistent. I prefer to keep everything consistent to the ordinances, but on the other hand, we're updating our ordinances, so good.
That's always good to establish authority before you start talking.
Yep, I get that. Okay, what else you got? You got the front page marked up.
Well, I got one other thing, but it's the English teacher in me. Flagpole's one word. B,
What's one word?
flagpole. I
Oh.
think it is, at least from memory.
Right, maybe.
Yeah.
I want to stress those big words across the front. Draft.
That's nitpicking, but I can't resist because I'm an editor. That's what I do.
All right, so
There you go. That's it for front page for me. It's definitions. They were good. And I imagine those are standard.
to an extent, they're standard to an extent. We can make our own definitions up as we like, as long as they're, once we codify them, that's what we live by. I'm open to other suggestions or comments. Let's, I guess on page 1.
Luxury
It's not luxurious, but it's pretty nice.
Turn this damn thing off.
Thank you for the reminder. I think my orders are
Oh,
on.
so everyone in this, back up so everyone in the room knows that we are being recorded. Make sure everybody knows that. So nothing else on one?
A couple of questions I had is when you're switching from the footage of the actual panels themselves to the size that the panels will possess, from going from the small, medium scale to the large scale, how densely packed can the large scale be?
Well, we have height restrictions on them.
Yeah, 15 foot high, but I mean, are we talking rows set side by side? Are you gonna have a minimum access to 10 foot required for those safety vehicles?
So in here, it talks about a 12-foot lane for safety.
Okay, I
Safety
wasn't
lane
sure
for
if that was like
vehicles.
one lane or if that was between separate.
So the actual density for it, it's not accounted for in there. I don't know if we need to. They're gonna have to have room to maintain them.
Okay,
But as far as the road, yeah, I talked to Terry Wakefield on that and they wanted a 12 feet wide lane. And,
Yeah.
I think I put the height in here also, might be 12 feet
14
also.
foot of height clearance shall be accessible for emergency vehicles, 12 foot wide road at a minimum. That's found under security large scale RFCs.
which further down the line, I have more questions about security.
Okay, good questions.
I'm gonna hit page 2. Permitting, right to the crux and say industrial solar energy systems are not permitted, so don't ask, no, I'm kidding. But why? Is it important? Do you want to open that can? I understand both reasons as to not including it and including it. So just your thoughts on that.
My thoughts are we don't put Y in any of our other zoning ordinances. This is our code. This is what we follow. It's
You're
simple.
stating it, and so.
That's why.
This is it. This is the Bible.
Yep.
So to speak.
Yeah, I don't think you.
Yes. Yeah, that's it.
Commissioner has the discretion to grant extensions.
So
Definitely.
where's that? Which paragraph? Oh, yeah. So Kevin's talking about section F at the top, permitting, and the last sentence is that the building commissioner has discretion to grant extensions. That's to building permits, which as building commissioner, I already have that now for regular building permits. I want to clarify that in here
So you're just
also.
restating it and as it applies to this.
Yes.
Nothing wrong with that.
The 2-year expiration of the building permit, it also kind of conflicts with something you say a little bit later, where once applied for, you have 6 months to start breaking ground. And if no activity is taken in a year, it's automatically pulled back.
I saw that after I printed it. So, yes, you're right. So our standard building permits in this files, most of this files that is you have to start within 6 months on a building permit right now. And then you have 2 years to complete it.
So actually,
So
it's not conflictual. Because by saying your building permit only lasts 2 years, that means you gotta
So
be
you
done.
really got 30 months.
No, you got 2 years to complete it. You got 6 months to get it started. So you gotta start at least breaking ground.
I think what he's saying is you break ground at 6 months, then you got 2 years to complete.
So the length of the term is 30 months. Or
No.
it could be.
The length of the term is 2 years. You
I
get a
understand
building,
that.
okay.
Yeah.
Then after you get that building permit, from that day you get your building permit, you got 6 months to get going.
Right.
But then it doesn't start the clock back on the backside of it. Am I
Okay.
missing?
no,
You
that's,
understand?
you're explaining it
Yeah.
correctly.
So you got your 2-year period of your building permit. I got my building
So you
permit
really only
today.
got 18 months to be taken to.
If you wait till 6 months to start
Okay.
breaking soil,
That's my question. Is
That's
it
it.
18 months or 30?
No. There you go.
See where I'm at.
I do, because that made me scratch my head. But yeah,
And frankly, typically, if somebody's progressing on a building permit right now,
Right.
maybe it's a person doing most of the work themselves and they're gonna take a little longer. Certainly, they would get an extension. It's if the work just stalls out, that's something else.
Because people are gonna ask that and they're gonna try to.
sure, they're gonna try to get an extension on the backside.
You
of it.
got it.
No,
Well,
I'm just-
I'll remember that,
Looking
and
for a pitfall.
yeah.
when this gets to our town council or attorney, I'll make sure that they're okay with that language.
Right.
And we're gonna pay them to go through this anyhow to make sure that it's compliant. All through it. The key parts I've already talked to, Jeanette Cerisi about.
Steve, where are these, panels not allowed? Which zoning districts? Yeah.
What type of panels?
Hmm?
What type of panels?
Any size panel?
So we have micro scale panels. So if you go to Lowe's and you buy those lights that you stick in the ground, those are solar. You know, they got a little peg on the end.
Right.
They charge during the day. They glow along your sidewalk at night.
Wife just bought a bunch of them too.
So those are panels. So we have to be specific on what you mean by panels.
Well, if somebody's using them to generate electricity to, you know, heat their home or use for home use.
I think we might get too deep. I'll use your words into the weeds again on that.
What size then is, it's not allowed?
So it's the area they cover.
Hmm?
So it's the area they cover, which is in the definitions on the first page.
I think it says in there somewhere, and I'm not sure where.
But there's the definitions on the first page of what they are.
Right.
Yeah,
Landscape lighting is not, is exempt.
Is exempt, sure.
so if there is a, you know, somebody, my neighbor wants to put in a, you know, half acre of panels in his yard, is that allowed?
So then we go back to we have half acre, which I believe is gonna fall under medium. Scale solar energy systems. So it's up to 1,750 square feet up to 43,560 square feet or an acre. But that's the definition. If you get in here further, I believe medium scale is gonna say that it is a special use. We'll have to go look back in at special use in the BZA. You have to go through the BZA for that.
The one thing is too, that your neighbor inside the corporate limits, any R1, R2, what else did we say?
L1.
L1 will not be able, because I think, Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, we talked about not allowing ground mounted within essentially corporate limits.
Discuss
It has to be roof mounted essentially.
from the standpoint of safety,
That's
particularly for kids running around.
absolutely. So I think that's gonna satisfy your question.
It is, thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
R1, R2, and L1 districts.
Yeah.
The one thing I noticed is going down, site plan, that would be letter G on page 2. Point number 7 is an excellent point, where there are environmental features, the site plan, and I can see certain areas where that's gonna probably come into play, especially when we can start considering wetlands. I think that maybe a clause in here about providing proper proof of permitting or materials that they've done their due diligence. And that's at the discretion of the building commissioner. I think we'll put one extra level on it rather than just the state, making sure those wetlands are good. That's primarily large scale, right? And when we start thinking where that might be.
Will be able to put them on, right?
You would-
Building a building.
You would think so. It's always nice to have that permitting in your hand. I think Stark County right now, Stark County is going through some of that with Knox, that if they followed the proper procedure and had all the permitting in place prior to the building. So I just think having those permits on file is recommended, but you're right, they should have them. So providing the proof will be easy.
So the state requires permits if you're gonna move over, I wanna say an acre. There's a certain amount of square feet. If you're gonna just start disturbing more soil than that you have to get state permits.
And I mean, it has to be the same soil as like you're gonna build a house, a barn.
No different.
Like you say, wetlands, you can't disturb a wetlands to put up solar panels in any sort.
But there is a approachment if you're coming within a certain distance of a wetland.
Areas so close,
Yeah.
20 feet.
Yeah, They're really sensitive. I've learned that. So just a suggestion. And then it goes back to my last one on page 2, under H with setbacks. I think Sally was the one that brought it up a while back about the ground mounted micro scale and small scale. That's something we could see in our agricultural areas outside of town, but I think like you said, maybe a clause in there about R1, R2, and preventing that from ground mounting inside of town. Less an issue out in agricultural areas. And that's one. Yes, sir.
What about PUD?
Say again, Rich.
PUD?
The PUDs?
Yes.
That's an excellent point. That is in play. Thank you, Rich.
What about?
I think we'll add it in there. That's it.
Commercials?
No,
Oh.
ours-
So when you say the planned urban development for the PUD districts,
We have PUDs in town within the city limits. There isn't any restriction as I heard you're talking about. L1, R1 and R2 are the restriction areas.
I hadn't thought of that. That's very, thank you.
That's why I'm wondering, and this is the question,
That's good.
are we better just stating within the corporate limits of town?
Because we have it, well, we have L1 all the way around the lake.
Yeah, so we fail there.
I'd rather be in districts than in corporate limits, since we're talking all of our zoning
You're right.
districts.
Yeah, I think
Right.
you're
So
right.
I'd rather just make it standard for R1, R2, L1, PUD.
Well, your subdivision,
Just
like
add
my
the
farms,
name.
that's one. I'm subdivision.
Yeah. But
So
I,
there's some, there's another safety valve. When you're talking, and we'll get to that, but the majority of these are gonna have to go through the BCA anyhow. It's not just an automatic, okay, there still has to be a hearing on it.
are we better off saying where ground mounted can be rather than where it can't be? As basically for ground mounted micro and small.
No, listen, I got the.
I keep pulling mine down.
I'm working with Cal, so I didn't think about
You don't need them for that, do you?
it. No,
They're big enough. So you
see, I'm out.
You don't want to go any further than that.
No, you don't. But I'm just, out of curiosity, if that's not something we consider.
Speaking of setbacks, we discussed that in one of our last meetings. Setbacks from any of the corporate limits of the town. What will that be?
Give me something specific.
Yeah. If somebody falls into a territory where they have a house and they are not in R1, R2, L1, and you're asking if they want to put panels in, what do they have to conform to in order to have household generated ground mounted? They have, based on this, it's gonna have to be normal setbacks. It'll be looked at as an auxiliary structure. Because it's gonna be about the size of a yard barn or a little bit bigger. So it's gonna be treated like a yard barn. So it's gonna have to be so far from the house, so far from the neighbor's property lines. That's the way I was reading this.
That's,
And then when it gets
That's
larger, is when it's 75 foot. But that's the large, 10 acres.
And that's the
Is that
setback.
enough?
Because that's the other question, is for like it's further down the line, so I'll wait till we get to. But barriers and sense. But that's further on.
that's, we can jump into it if you want to go to those sections. While we're on page 2, and I heard this, you see it's highlighted and under section H1 setbacks, large scale SES have a 75-foot setback requirement. Remember, it's only going to go to 10 acre. Now, if we said 500 foot on a 10-acre lot all the way around, you're going to have a circle maybe that's big in the middle where you can actually do something. So the intent of that is to make sure that somebody's going to use it for their own, whether it's for their agriculture, running, supplementing factories, supplementing our wastewater treatment plant. Like Plymouth's got
Mhm.
in the ground they weren't using, which offsets the vast majority of their electric bill for that. I wanted to make sure that we can fit things actually on the property and to be fair. And yeah, if it was industrial scale, 500 feet, I don't even know if that's enough. But we're talking up to 10 acres for, it's essentially the intent is for
Personally.
Well,
personal use or your business use.
what I'm wondering about is the, effect on property values of people that already have homes, like on the edge of the town, right on the corporate limits. And somebody wants to put a large scale solar system in there. What do they have to do to avoid deteriorating the property value of the people that are already living there?
This is where it comes into it's a special use that has to be with BZA. And I think each case would have to be weighed differently. If you're in town and your property next to you is you're in town limits, property next to you is not in town limits, and it may be S1 in your backyard, that would be the time where I think it would be argued at the BZA on if that's good enough or not.
I think that, and this goes back to the fencing material and that much of the discretion of the security large scale is really at the hands of the BZA. I've noticed that when I was reading through a lot of the decision, whether or not it goes in is at the discretion of the BZA, because I do think there is a situational element to this, a subjectivity almost. Whereas it's a luxury that we have where other utilities coming in don't really give you, whether or not you have a power line running through. Usually can kind of nullify that and put it right through. I think we have a great deal of control for that kind of concern within the BZA.
And that's the intent of putting this as special use versus
There's also
regular use.
training that's required between.
There is.
There is.
For large scale.
Yeah, for large scale. There's a great deal of discretion within the BZA all the way around for large scale. So we're making it increasingly more difficult as you move the scale upward. Is what I saw within the ordinances.
And of course, you got a section here on glare, which could be a real problem with putting a system like that in next to, an area that's filled with houses.
And that's one thing that I wrote down that Chester brings up with large scale. It's one thing to put it on the ground. It's another to maintain compliancy. Inspection. Is that something that I miss?
That's just like any of our other ordinances at this point. If it's a zoning ordinance, it's gonna fall under me or building commissioners to investigate any complaints or any compliance issues. And that also gives the building commissioner's got the authority to issue fines
And you established.
and or
Yeah.
preferably not fines, but force a correction. If something's out of compliance, that's the ideal thing.
And that's where, and I didn't realize till you just got done, but is that something you want to add to page 1 under your authority? That you will be the sole, I mean, for instance, this falls under the compliancy and inspection of the building commissioner.
Yeah, I think there's more said about that in here further.
Okay, good. That's why I was asking. That's good.
No, great points. And that's why we talk. So let's talk about it, just make sure, under H on setbacks, large scale. 75 feet. I plugged a number in, that's why it's in bold in here. I'm not here to make that decision. That's a community, that's a decision for this group to help make, and any help.
Is that from property line?
It is. It is, just so it's gonna fall like our other setbacks, so it'd be from the property line.
So that's 2 first downs in football. 20, just a little bit over.
So
It's not. It's not.
No, it's not, but I'm
They're
just trying to image
practicing.
that. I'm trying to image that about just about
Okay,
25.
well, it's something to consider too. I just want to throw that out there.
How much from the property line, you know, if you're right on the edge of town, how far do you want to go from the property line then? Not only 75 feet, if you're talking about a large scale system. I think you'd want it more than that.
I guess my thought is if you're putting a vegetation screen or a vegetative buffer with a 4-season screen, you're already requiring it to be at least 6 feet, a minimum of 20 feet mature height. Like, doesn't matter how close to the line it is, because it's going to be solid vegetation. So the neighbors are just gonna see trees.
It'll be securely, they'll have to have a chain link fence around it
And trees, and so.
and at least 2 rows of trees. And specifically, as you get in here, it'll say that if they have to replace any dead or dying trees within 60 days.
Yeah. So that you're not gonna be able to tell. if it's
So it has to be,
that line.
they're being forced to maintain it.
What I'm saying is 75 feet enough.
Well, let's go back to the at least language of the 6 foot, right?
Mhm.
Why don't we start it at 75 foot and it's the discretion of the BZA? We can make that conditional.
Yeah,
It
because if
starts,
it's our,
it starts at 75.
can it go smaller?
No,
No,
at least, we may want to choose the words at least 75 foot. And if we get into a property issue where we're getting more neighbors or something, that's something we could, as a BZA, we could make allowance for by saying you have a conditional approval, but you're gonna have to comply to this setback.
at least 75 feet or at the discretion of.
Where does the 75 foot come from?
It's a random number.
So what Steve did was he put a bunch of distances on them.
Let's go to 500.
Yeah. That's why we're here.
The biggest thing that goes on with setbacks is just like you go up to St. Joe County and they put a minimum in on large scale solar that they only got 75 feet back from a property line in the state of Potato Creek area. And now all the residents have found out that they've only got 75 feet, and that's why there's all the I'll say uproar now up in the area because they didn't realize it was so close. So 75 feet, I think is sort of established as the minimum that the state put out that, we need to have a minimum of 75 feet back. And then when it goes to the different studies on setbacks, I'm only in tune with I'll say large scale industrial solar that the studies have done that you need a minimum of 400 feet from a property line so you don't have property value loss. Now, when it comes to I'll say when I'm sitting listening to you and I'm looking at your 2 mile zone and I go, okay, what is, and you're saying you're going to have some ground solar that might be in some areas. I think that people would have to have minimum acreage to even if they're going to have 75 feet setbacks, you're going to have a very limited area within your area.
It is.
And so the biggest thing that I look at is what you're doing is just establishing the ground rules, and your minimum of 75 feet is a good way to start it. And then depending on, and then you got the BZA. So then if someone is trying to push it to put in something bigger on their own personal property, that then the neighbor thinks it might be encroaching on their property value, and he wants more than the 75 feet, that's where you got your BZA.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, it's a whole different subject you guys are dealing with when it comes to the small areas, you know. And the biggest thing that I look at is when you look, I'll say around the country, is when it comes to, like you said, Plymouth utilized some empty space up their water treatment plant and put some solar in. And then you go to Washington, I think it's Washington School when you're heading towards the Dairy Queen.
It is.
And they've got a few segments in there. And that's the kind of stuff that, you know, and they've got the bushes going up, that's the kind of stuff that's a small areas. I've never heard of a study that says that's gonna drop your property value. It's just the industrial stuff that the massive stuff, that's the area. So I look at you're doing your due diligence, and 75 feet comes, I think, from a minimum. And I think if you go down to the state, and I don't know if you saw it, but St. Joe County was given like 5 stars for being the greatest county for being pro the renewable energies. And their initial ordinances were 75 feet. And so then a person who's got their home, and all of a sudden they're going, wait a minute. And that's exactly what's going on in Potato Creek right now.
Yeah, we're canceled, Dana, for that.
Dana was canceled. Yeah, I thought it was.
Yeah.
Sure, I saw you guys.
Yep, we're good.
Yeah.
So yeah, at least and at your discretion, maybe consideration.
Okay. Got those notes down?
Thank you. And yet we don't want to make it prohibitive because if somebody's putting it out on, for agriculture, something like that, which isn't a whole lot within the zoning.
And just to stress too, remember, this is just the solar panels. We have a whole battery energy storage systems ordinance to go through after we get this one taken care of.
Well, it was just the reason I was asking is because large scale goes down to about 1 acre, and that's 208 feet by 208 feet. If you're taking 75 feet off each side, that's 150 feet.
You ain't there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you get a dot in the middle of a giant open area.
One giant panel surrounded by a chain link fence with bushes. That's beautiful. Prohibitive. Creative prohibitive.
It is, but then that would be a good case to argue. I think, when we have this language in here that you could go to BZA and argue, I can't get what I want, and my neighbors don't mind. Give me a little bit more. And then at that time, BZA is gonna do their due diligence, because they're gonna have to decide, well, does this person have 100 acres that they just want to use a little dot out of, or do they really have the room? Are they gonna want to expand? Which, just another thought is, we limit it to 10 acres, somebody subdivides their property into 100 acres into 10 acre lots, just struck me, so
This happens all the time.
I don't know how you would avoid that. That would be a challenge.
The other question I had is about the roof mounted ones. It's
What page you on?
page 2. Roof mount. May not exceed max, it may exceed the maximum building height, but does not exceed 5 feet above the height of the roof line. And then further on, there was a definition about roof mounted. And it basically said it was to sit on the roof. It didn't sound like it was gonna have a tip to it.
So there's some state statutes around roof mounted units. That when it comes to heights, that although we have like a maximum 35-foot building height, I'm pretty sure in state statute says you can still go above that to put solar panels.
Oh, yeah, because your house isn't gonna sit square or face directly south, so you're gonna get tipped panels.
Which is part of what, trying to be sensitive, make sure that we're compliant with state statute at the same time.
Roof line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I would
There was
expect,
somewhere where it made it sound where it had to be flat on the roof, and I can't find that section, no.
so, and state statutes are definitely gonna be changing next year after everyone gets into office and settled.
Roof mounted ASCs shall be installed so that they meet all performance standards specified under this ordinance, including but not limited to glare.
I'm on page 5 now, section E. Size classification limitation shall not apply to roof mounted LTS and use permitted and they do not exceed the roof line of existing structure.
By more than 5
Am I
feet.
reading that wrong? Yeah.
No, you're not,
Okay.
my opinion. That's a simple fix,
Yeah,
by more than 5
good
foot.
catch.
Boy, you really did spend a little time with it.
Got more
I was reading too. We get past. I like the impervious stuff that you put in. I get back on page 3. The reference to the Mayfog.
Yeah,
Is it for the pollinator?
yes.
Throw that reference in there. So they can quickly obtain it, but I like that.
So they'll have that and they're gonna be more up to date on what's current than we
Yep.
are.
Yep. Don't have to maintain it.
When rules change, MACOG is gonna be on top of it. That's what they get paid to do. We may not hear about changes, so
For the pollinator.
we can count on them to get those updates. There's three extra draft copies. I'm sorry, some of them are trying to follow along.
If you're playing along at home.
Your glasses. So go ahead.
Oh,
Page.
No.
All right, give me some more notes.
Sally brought up one very small use, which are the landscape on lights. Rebuilt it on the lake. As a sort of- Is that, I mean, by size wise, that's excluded from what you're talking about.
So that's, Those are most-
Mentioned.
I think those will fall under the micro scale,
Yep.
which there's already something that has to be changed on this, I noted too. Because there's a point in here where it says they can only be inside the backyard, so that language has to be corrected. That's a good point too. Thank
This
you.
is, since you're here, how much room is there in large, like, not the industrial, but large scale for small farms for powering, supplementing energy? Not a lot of stomach? Okay. So that's what we're talking about here. I mean, in a lot of ways.
The ones I know and deal with, they're not giving up ground to do that.
Right.
I mean, yeah, you could put up an acre of solar panels to run some fans on bins for a while,
Yeah.
but it's not gonna run the leg, it's not gonna run
No.
your dryer, it's not gonna, you know.
Put lights on a
put
milking
something
house,
to
but
Run your shop lights.
yeah, that's what I was thinking for like a dairy, but
You know,
You can stick
the
them
only
on
people
your
that's giving up ground out here is like greedy and they don't wanna farm.
okay.
A real opinion on that?
I just said it.
Hey, do you play poker? You're gonna put the cards right down, aren't you? No bluffing. All right, fair enough, fair enough. I just got curious what.
Yeah.
Where people out farming thinking, I've talked to a few too that got pretty similar opinion.
When you drive the countryside, and just in town, is you'll see, I'll say, what I call the angling solar panel that maybe fills the front yard. Or not even the front yard. And I think the thing that I've been intrigued with is driving the area with some the Amish are. They got solar panels up on their roofs and stuff like that. So I'm just saying it's the small stuff where I feel like you got big power demand, it's not even satisfied. Or if you got a little open, and then the other thing. It's probably not fits that. I mean, it's the present.
So as we go through, as you look, got something?
Yeah, I'm not trying to, but just another reference, drainage, large and medium. On page 3, be number 4. Last point, D, compliant with erosion control standards, Article 6, Section 60 of,
Of our zoning ordinances.
there we go. And I assumed that, but I wasn't 100% sure simply because you referenced it.
Let's
above.
not assume, I'll just be more specific there.
Appreciate you. I'm,
That's a good catch.
I don't know about that. We're gonna have some pine trees planted, it looks like.
Okay, and it goes into section 5 right below that, security. They have to have a perimeter fence. On large scale of at least 6 feet in height. It has to be installed on the outside of the facility to include a 75-foot setback buffer, same as what the other area said. The fence has to be chain link. Other fence material may be approved by the BZA. So again, there's some flexibility, but it's specific. The security fence must be kept repaired, painted, and maintained in good structural and visual condition. And then a vegetative buffer for season maintained around the entire circumference of the facility to reduce visual impact. It has to be, the plants have to start at 6 feet tall, native conifer evergreens. What you mentioned before, Joel, and have to grow at least 20 feet. Have to be anything dead or dying, diseased, has to be replaced within 60 days. That again will come from the building commissioner. Security Knox box, which is already in our ordinance.
Do you want to move that up with the, up above with A? The fence shall be chain link and have access provided by a knock box. You can just knock out C and just throw it up with A. Or you can move that chain link fence part from A down there. Those are linked together.
I'd like to leave, I can move Knox box, but I want it to be its own category to stand out. It's already in our ordinances and I want it to stand out. They're very important.
How about a Knox box key
You might
storage?
highlight Knox boxes.
Must be
I mean,
used
it's
with
a thought.
Yeah, I would say a Knox box key storage readily available at an access point for the Culver Union Township, right? So we control the location of it. Not that they wouldn't put it at the darn access point, but don't assume.
Does that have to be determined when the permit is let or not?
Mhm. I think so. That's Steve's question though. I think it was down at the executive.
What was the question?
Is the Knox box, a condition of the permit
Yes,
location?
yes.
We did it with the executive.
We've got it with every, yeah, they can't get their certificate of occupancy without having that.
Well, and then they where it is and so the police department, the fire department knows where it is.
It is, and there's training sections in here too,
Got
that
it.
they're gonna be required to do the training, which is already part of state code. The state, you're gonna have to get a certificate of occupancy to get started for their building permit.
Mhm.
One of the things is you gotta meet all the standards, including having a Knox box.
No, I thought certificate of, I thought that meant you were, before you could let anybody move in.
So if you have a building permit, it is, but it's also do business there is the meaning of that. So they can't start up until they're all the boxes are checked.
I think we need to have this provided green screening for a smaller than large scale. The medium scale should also have green screening, particularly when it's close to other areas where people have homes.
The only argument I would say against that is that then they'll fall under fences in town, green screening fences, and if you go with a minimum of 6 foot, that's going to go against some angle
Setbacks.
positions, yeah, setbacks and neighbors and heights of fences and like close to the roads. So you can put like some green up to help, so the neighbor doesn't look out his kitchen window and see it, but like the road and stuff, you're gonna have different perimeters of green screening you can do. See what I'm saying?
What we wanted to do is block off not only the site
Privacy
of
fence,
the panels, but
privacy
the
fence,
glare.
You're gonna run,
in the city limits, make it privacy fence.
you could. You might run into some of the same problems as you would with vegetation. With the setbacks.
You'll have two different things. In the fence and vegetation, if you just put a privacy fence, you're 6 feet or 6 inches wide.
Mhm.
And that's it.
As long as it's compliant with our existing fence ordinance.
Yeah, because you gotta be so far back from the,
I mean, we got to take that into consideration.
but
So
I like the idea of some type of screening.
I'll look into that more.
We'll have hedgerows like England. That'd be good.
I guess
It'll not only block off the solar panel vision, but, it'll
I think we need to be careful not to also get the negative effect of blocking somebody's view by forcing that there too. It could potentially go the other way. Now it's like, I didn't want that there because the solar panels didn't block my view as much as your fence and trees do now. There's a balance. I'll look into that. I'm gonna see what else I can find. I'm not saying it's a bad idea by any stretch. Just wanna make sure we capture all the different parts of it.
One question I have about the columns. Is there a reason that it has to get up to 20 feet, like is 6 feet not enough?
The answer to that, I don't have a good answer for you.
Okay.
I think if you're getting something that's gonna fill out more and grow more. I know when you plant trees and they say you need to plant them so far apart, if you plant them too close, you know, they choke each other out.
Mhm.
So they want to be planted, so that may have something to do with how high they're growing based on growth up and width at the bottom. This is not, I didn't make this up. I copied and pasted this.
Okay, that's why I wasn't sure if you got it from a certain area. and
It
you-
just feels like 20 foot is pretty close to a second story building, and I'm thinking they're thinking about you have to block it from all view.
And
But for the life of me, I don't know why.
Minimum of height restriction of building and like, we're talking outskirts of town.
I know.
A tree.
I'm telling you, I get it, but I was just guessing at the reason why 20. Well, I'm hungry.
I am too.
Last night it blows over.
And then
So
He
far.
blows over.
it's not gonna touch a panel. 'cause it's 75 feet away.
See? We think everything here in Culver.
It's well vetted. How about that?
All right, page 5. I am getting hungry. Here, but I like your abandonment decommissioning requirements. I like the idea of having the topsoil readily available because somebody may want to flip that back to ag. But the one thing I was wondering is the applicant shall, beginning at G, page 5, abandonment and decommissioning. The applicant shall submit decommissioning plan to be reviewed and approved by the town of Culver Council with an appropriate surety bond and special use application. I love all of it. The one thing I was wondering is on the smaller stuff, with large scale, I think it's less of an issue. I'm wondering for medium and small scale, can we require a property owner to provide proof of disposal? I would like that because I don't want to see homeowners trying to throw this in landfills and stuff like that. I want, just like we used to with tires and batteries and everything else, I think it's reasonable to ask for that and environmentally responsible.
So they don't dig a hole in the.
There you go.
And
The good old,
and bury it.
the good old days. Yeah. Dad changed the oil with a hole in the sand.
It's funny, but it's true. So, okay, I'll do some more work on that too.
I guess what would be nice is if you're gonna require that, you wanna also offer, like, do we know of places that will accept panels? So like, as part of the decommission.
Yeah.
You're coming in and you're saying that when it's not working anymore, you're gonna get rid of it. These are places you could go with it, go to them.
These are
bring
the-
this back.
I mean,
then you
more
can turn it
importantly-
in.
More importantly, you're controlling the disposal of it now. If you have it, you have to register.
Yeah.
And these are the places that you have to take it to and show us proof to deregister it.
So before we go too far down
Yeah,
this
sorry.
one here,
Yeah.
we're still waiting on Senate Enrolled Act number 33. That is all about decommissioning solar. So until they have that, that's due out October 1st. This is, might as well consider this a
What they-
standing draft because we don't know what the state's
You
gonna
may
come
not
up with.
see it in the-
So the DNR is waiting on that report. When the DNR gets that report, or the Senate gets that report from the DNR about decommissioning, we can get into more depth on that.
Mhm. What are you guys doing tonight? We can drive down there. Let's get this solved. Oh, no? I like that. So hold on that.
So on the decommissioning, any comments or thoughts, certainly we can jot those down.
Mhm.
But it's gonna be nice to see what the state decides on that.
Yep. Yeah, cause we gotta know where they can even take it. So we tell them to take it somewhere.
That's right.
And
And that's.
my understanding, that's extremely limited right now, and when
Yeah.
these things actually start falling apart and whole number, 10 years, there's gonna be a lot of them all at once, and there's no gonna be anywhere near enough facilities. These things are gonna be stacked in fields waiting to be recycled, because we're not gonna have the facilities to do it.
So it's gonna be
It's,
plastics.
So somebody in about 5 years is gonna figure it out and they'll be,
famous last words.
that'll be the
Yeah.
next thing we're talking about is decommissioning facilities coming into.
Just give
Yeah,
them the subsidies, they'll do it, they'll figure that.
it's to put them in and to take them out. That's where the money's at on.
Oh,
Anyway.
So I heard a lot from
we're being
everybody.
recorded. Yeah.
Extra notes here, just getting us closer to dialed in.
Okay.
Is there any other comments, anything we can add? I'll look into all your comments, they're all good. And your thoughts, you have your concerns. Regarding the setback too, still on my mind on 75 feet for 1 or 2 acres.
Yeah. Like, I understand the bigger you get, but then if you're requiring them to put all this fencing in.
And that's, again, I want to make sure I have it phrased right, but the BZA can play a big part in helping make sure that the right things go in the right places.
I think it's very interesting too, the comment, because where we're in play as agricultural. That's where the land's at to be able to do something like that. I think,
Yeah.
to your point, I just wonder what the use.
Anything really big is gonna be,
Yeah.
I think would be agricultural or industrial.
Not
Now, we're gonna have one-
large. Yeah.
We're gonna have one more zoning district that I'm gonna be working on. It's gonna be institutional.
Mhm.
We're gonna add that, and that'll be targeted for the academies. For their land and their uses, their buildings are not the same as any other buildings in town by any stretch.
And their land isn't the same either. They have an airport, or used to.
So
Yes, they did and do.
I want to work with them as well as then with the community, finish getting their ideas in mind. I'm not rushing it, but I have got something started for an industrial district or institutional district also for them. Strictly for their campuses and maybe the horse farms and that, not for their housing. That still had to
Right.
fall underneath ours. Just so you know, there's a lot in the works right now with our zoning ordinances, make them better.
You've done a good job on all of this.
Done a lot of work.
Put a lot of time and effort in it.
Yeah.
Thanks, Steve.
There's a,
Thanks, still ways to go. And then when we get this done, we can start on a battery energy storage system.
there's a nice.
Any comments?
These regulations cover property transfers, any responsibility with that,
Yeah, so the zoning ordinances won't change.
right? But if someone were to buy property that has solar installed, do they have to reapply for a permit? Do they have to show proof that they're maintaining the system? And they just sort of,
It's a really good question. The short answer is, it will, just like any of our other zoning ordinances, they'll automatically apply.
They inherit the responsibility.
is it something that would go hand in glove with the purchase of the properties? The realtor would say, you've just inherited this liability and I want you to know. So what the terms
So
are.
and my perspective and with this ordinance, the town's perspective would be yes, and it's up to the purchaser to do their due diligence as well as when you purchase property,
Disclosure.
you have your disclosure forms and it's gonna have to be disclosed on there. But if they have a
Right.
issue going on,
Okay, sure.
yeah, something that we don't want to have to own that.
You're right.
I'm getting towards, I'm moving towards the door.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Have a good evening.
Steve, do you want this wrap back?
No, if you want,
Okay.
to look, use it. If you have any comments or anything based
You
on.
want Paul?
Thank
You
you.
want
Thank you. Hey.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Good job, sir. Thank you.
Is industrial scale the same